anything that you want us to introduce you as, or should we just jazz it?
I can go jazz, but like variations on a theme of Duncan. I would say mystic turned financier turned artist, spoken word poet, and waltzing through the fluid sea of life, Duncan Horst. Here on the Highley Varlet podcast.
Fantastic. Welcome to the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm not going to bother doing an introduction because we just heard a fantastic one from Duncan Horst. Thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to have you here.
Yep, I am wet and happy here in some kind of park in Chelsea.
Yeah.
With your two bright, shining, smiling faces, Varlet in the pink, Jesse in the gold. And you know, I love podcasting. I super love walking.
Yeah.
And I love the route that we've planned for today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those listening, watching, depending on your preference, we are in Manhattan for the first week on our long journey, and our first week takes us through Midtown, which was exciting for several reasons to have Duncan on. One, he recently was employed in the Midtown area for quite some time, and two, we're walking a route that is unique pretty much for the entirety of our trip because we're walking in a grid.
Yeah, back and forth up each avenue and over between 23rd and 59th Street. And we cover this entire area, just going back and forth in parallel lines throughout Midtown.
Which kind of makes sense. So I was in finance for 6 years, and scrolling through spreadsheets and seeing like Excel documents kind of looks like the street grid of Midtown and is the profession of the majority of Midtown by net worth. So it's an interesting way, because you're like, I was at the top of one of the skyscrapers there. It's like at the 50th floor of a 50th story building, and looking down, it looks like you're playing this giant game of Sim City, which you essentially are.
Yeah.
And that's like, that is the job of, you know, the forces that move probably 70% of the world is like designing the grid lines. But then you're kind of polishing the eye on the pyramid on the dollar bill. You're kind of like figuring out how to like scry or like build throughways in the matrix, or just like include more territory in the matrix. So you're like just continually puzzling through one of the rooms on Borges' labyrinth, and then like harnessing energy from the sluiceways to propel whatever of your id fantasies have been compacted during the machine. So it's just like you still express the totality or some variant of the totality of human experience. It's just like you have a work hard, play hard, or like compact your mental and then figure out a way to either free it or become some kind of functionary regardless of how much money you make, because you deaden your capacity to play and create.
Yeah.
So there becomes this like this spring-loaded necessity to use the excess capital you harvest from Midtown to ensure a sense of like aliveness and play there that is hard to understand if you're not in it. But I guess the difference with some of these professions is you're completely fueled. So if you're neuroplastic enough to break out of the hyper-Protestant compound capital unto heaven, like raise Moloch to the highest height, and then donate it all to charity when you're 80 years old or something like that. So never even touch the potential energy harvested essentially from the world's soil. If you can co-opt that, you can have a lot of fun while doing so and learn a lot about the world. And then hopefully you get out before you atrophy or become completely amoral. Da-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Yeah.
Totally. But I mean,
well,
even for the, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, well, that concept of collecting and collecting and collecting to then donate, is that almost feels performative in a way, but it also feels like you're being a martyr in another way. If you're donating to a worthwhile cause at the end, is the destruction that you're creating along the way, does that balance out? Or like, you know, how does that pendulum then swing, and what does your soul end up feeling at the end of that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it involves a good deal of hubris to think that whatever your cause you're donating to is enough to balance out or to even be worth the time that you spent getting there. But yeah.
People can feel power, people can feel money, and a great deal of discernment is involved in making it a worthwhile delta.
Yeah.
That said, the people who are moving the most of it, like if you're like a mid-level human who is making actionable decisions, but you're still accountable to like the big cheese who's been doing it for like decades, you've still got to like talk a language that makes sense to them. Like if it doesn't make sense to them, you're just not getting in. So if you go full revolutionary, you're probably not going to be pleasant to work with, and eventually you just won't be working in that capacity anymore.
Right,
So
and then it's not your choice anymore either.
Then it's not your choice anymore. It's definitely necessary to screen out sycophants or people who are just like interested in power for power's sake and like want to use that or use your access or some idea, because a lot of people just have fantasies about like, oh, you're involved in this, therefore you can change the world. I can't because I'm projecting my agency onto these other forces which I'm being victimized by, but you're the good guy on the inside. So it's in your hands now, Bubbaloo, and if you fall short of that, then I can project my agency further onto the good guys that we had faith in who weren't able to do it. So there's this whole like extraction and projection, and the extraction from the earth is ultimately supported by people buying the goods and services that are extracted from the earth rather than like alternative vehicles. But then I'm sorry, I'm like going on these like financial tangents. The bargain basement Walmart made of plastic stuff is often the only cheap alternative for a lot of people in a world where money is just being printed. The value of money is going down. The prices for real things are going up because people make them by hand and with love, and it takes time, as you know.
As I know. As we know, this is something we talk about a lot, and it's one of the main components of this project as well, is what we're wearing and where it comes from, and thinking about the labor that goes into that, and talking about unions as we walk around, and each season wearing a different union shirt to represent the labor of the people. And that's a real challenge for how to make things accessible, but also not make things accessible in a way that is hurting other people that we don't see behind the curtain.
Yeah. Well, it's fewer better things ultimately. Fewer better things is kind of the European model, and it's just better. Like your clothes have more life, and that was the thing too. I mean, like the ultimate. I can go down some of these tracks as well. Dating in New York without committing is polyamory without communication. And I was engaged in that for a couple of years to my, I won't say dismay, but it just ultimately wasn't a good look, because like the true wealth of connection, of love, comes with, yes, discernment, but also commitment. You're just not going to get there at the 2-week month or 1 month mark. Yeah. Like with person after person. You're getting like, you're squaring the circle by like trying to build some conjecture of the center based on the variations of the surface of like a lot of people, but that's also the same as like compounding your capital, like building up option value, opportunity value, keeping a portfolio. And there are like people on Wall Street who have like spreadsheets for their dating lives and like Tinder profiles and shit. Yeah. Insane stuff. Yeah. But that model of it's kind of a hedonistic reductionism, like a scientific materialism applied to the emotions, doesn't successfully colonize them, but it does render the center of love, of agape, of those kind of values of charity less and less accessible to those who continue to heighten those brain patterns. I actually won't say it wasn't the norm in my office. The norm in my office was stable marriage, 2 kids, super expensive place on the Upper West Side, which is why you're compounding the capital to begin with, to be able to afford the preschool for like for Jimmy and like
to
vacations in the Maldives.
To accumulate things and
Well, yeah, but Jimmy's eventually got to get married to adhere with the hyper-Protestant
Right.
ethos anyway, because otherwise what would Jimmy be doing? Those are big shoes to fill.
My brother's Jimmy, and he works in Midtown.
But that's
name.
not the
not
Jimmy
not
we're
like he's
talking
not
about.
a Jimmy, like his name is literally
Yeah.
Jimmy. It's funny that it just happened to choose that name.
Oh yeah, you guys got something going on.
He actually was in town this week. Unfortunately, we didn't communicate. He came in
Oh.
for the first time since March because he had a doctor's appointment.
Oh, wow.
But yeah.
Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah. But anyway, I want to talk about the grid a little bit more. I had some thoughts about it that I had withheld when we were talking on the phone in the hall, so to speak, leading up to this interview. But I think it also relates a little bit to what you were communicating to me on either Monday or Tuesday about we've had, a bunch of walks that we've talked to you about previously to some degree, our vacation walks.
Uh-huh.
And they are, in a very real sense, vacation walks, which is to say we set aside time in order to have that space, and it exists outside of reality relative to our lives. And so we gain so many benefits from that we continue to bring into this current reality, which is our New York walking reality. However, there exists some aspects of the vacation walk that have eluded us to this point. And I think for Jessie, it was becoming acute, and she communicated it to me that she wasn't getting there thus far.
Yeah.
And for me, I was thinking about it a lot relative to how we have started to accumulate different things that we want to do at any given week on the walk. We want to record. We want to do just a 360 recording and then a GoPro like walk around recording. We want to do our use of force sub podcast, which is when we take a different use of force NYPD incident from the past decade and talk about it, and something that occurred along our route. We want to do the podcast, which happens either on a weekend or a weekday, but we're also planning around the podcast. I also have the stickers that I showed you as we were walking up here, and I have put a quota in my head for how many I want to do on any given week.
Yeah.
So all of this starts creating a situation where it is very much not setting aside a time to be present.
Right.
It is having tasks to do, and granted, these are all things that I want to do, but there is a sneakiness to having tasks that you always must be careful of in a somewhat overlapping way to the idea of working in finance and, being mindful of what you're getting into at any given time. And I think the grid was something that really clarified that for me this week, because it is, you're just walking on these paths, and any deviation from the paths can be troubling. The second day when we were walking, Jessie requested that we go from 2nd Avenue all the way to 11th Avenue.
Because it was a tropical storm, and I was worried that we'd get stuck in it with all the wind over near the water and get blown into the Hudson.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to get blown into the Hudson.
Of course. Who wants to get blown into the Hudson?
Yeah, nobody.
And so once we did that, though, it then became very much cognizant in my mind that we were off the path. And then thinking about mileage became very apparent, and just the streamlined nature of this area to try and remove chunks of human experience or pathfinding, to make it super simple, made it more clear to me that there were all these activities that we are engaging in that make up what the day is, and start cluttering the mind and taking away from the present moment the navigation, the experience of what's going on.
And that's the main thing that we walk away from with the vacation walks, is that we're there, we're present, we're not using our phones except for to look at the map occasionally. We come back to where we're staying and we relax and we go to sleep and we wake up and do it the next day. And it's this chunk of time where we're just super in it. And trying to find that balance now, because we're not on vacation.
I mean, it's we're hunter-gatherers, so we're programmed to find nuts and find berries and store them and memorize the best berry finding locations and understand where the good plants grow and where the bad snakes are, and then wait a second, if we plant this wheat, it'll grow in several months. So how do we do that? And then that coupled with like the information economy, and the progression of capitalism such that most of the means of production are already beneficially owned by corporations or individuals controlling corporations. So the next expanse of capitalism has followed the information economy into control of people's attention or people's brains, and then like how do we maximize within that economy and do good there? Like how does our share of the mind share have a beneficial effect on other people? How do we mind sculpt in a way that is good for them, good for us, and puts positive delta in their heads? And then wait a second, do we do this white hat? Do we do it gray hat? Do we do it slightly black hat, but it's for their own good? Like how do we build the social media profile? So the hunting and gathering shifts from physical goods, which you can buy at the store cheaper than you can actually get them, to hunting and gathering attention share, which has been sculpted by the grid line is based almost on like servers or microchips, just like everything sliding into place. It is the matrix in all but name only, and we're recording this not just for posterity or so the angels are listening, but like as we're broadcasting signal. We're broadcasting signal of Highley Varlet. I'm broadcasting signal because some of these thoughts, and these are like relatively superficial thoughts because they're stored in my neocortex. Like if I really got raw and got into emotions, then I'd be, like a Tori Amos kind of like, you'd be pulling the magician's handkerchiefs from my throat. Hopefully we can get there at some point. But like, this is just like stuff that I've absorbed about reality through research and through like looking at it and whatever blogs I read and all of it. Now I'm like contextualizing it and like regurgitating it as a Duncan node to a Varley node and a Jesse node, and it's like, where is the frontier? Like this kind of manifest destiny ethos of like colonizing all existable land, and now we've done that, so it's like colonizing all existable neurons. I think it causes this really interesting predator-prey relationship for the attention of people that then spawns an evolution in a minority of the prey animals, which would be all of us basically who are existing outside of the share ownership and these like large attention attractor states. Because prey animals evolve in nature to evade capture and being devoured. And so I think a lot of like the psychic phenomena, a lot of like the resurgence in going back to roots and community and psychedelics and spiritual practices is naturally being accelerated as a way to resist these mechanisms that kind of turn on humanity. In the same way, this is a huge exaggeration because every discussion eventually finds a Schelling point at like Adolf Hitler. It just all reaches Hitler at some point. But like the idea...
You said Regis Hitler.
Yeah, Regis Hitler. Heil Regis? No. But like the idea that what King Leopold did in the Belgian Congo was simply done in Germany against Europeans in Auschwitz and in the concentration camps. It's like the same appropriate, strip wealth, send chosen people to extermination, is kind of the idea of like what happened to the land could potentially happen to people's minds if there's not some kind of noble alternative. So like capitalism as the tendency of all of life to be reduced into capital, reduced into matter, it has classical satanic or Zoroastrian tendencies painted into it if there isn't some kind of societal higher good that is raised above it. And so this is a far departure from the grid lines, but it's kind of like that. Like if everything becomes a grid that is rigid and fixed and kind of petrified, the only thing that can illuminate that grid is new life. And that's why like Broadway and the arts, there's this whole feminine shadow side and undercurrent to New York City, which is the only thing that makes that kind of vortex and accumulation possible and sustainable without, I think, the entire thing freezing and atrophying.
Yeah.
And Broadway happens to be the one that.
I was just going to say that runs not off the grid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's some like heavy territory, but like I just kind of walked these streets for like for years, and I remember crying twice on my way to work in the tower because like I was listening to these musicals, and I was like rather be writing a musical or acting in a musical than finding the next company to invest in, despite how lucrative it was for me personally and how much it was actually changing my life and giving me that kind of like daddy issues buy-in from society that I lacked for a while. I don't slag it. It sounds like I slag it. It sounds a lot like I slag it. But I was in some desperate situations, and like for at least 4 of the 6 years, it was super necessary for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
2 were probably needless and like grinding down the stub of the eraser. But 4 gave me that kind of like graduate degree in reality that I sorely needed as this like weird artist mystic, but like not knowing how to plug in.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's good that you were able to figure out when the time to detach was, and then ultimately make the detachment, because a lot of people know that they have to detach. I felt similarly at my previous job, where I knew that I had to go for a while, and it just became a more of an issue of figuring out when to leave, which was why it took so long to plan what we're doing.
How much extra time do you think? But the delta between knowing you had to go and knowing when to leave?
It's a little confusing because there was the project that released, and I wanted to stay through the end of that project, but knew that I shouldn't be there any longer. But then there was the period post-project, which was about a year, where it was definitely like time to leave, period.
You can't wait for the bonus. I stayed an extra like 2 years waiting for the bonus.
Yeah.
Right.
And like, it was like 11 months in and the bonus was looking great, and then December the markets crashed and there was the bonus.
Gosh.
Oh no.
And like the same thing almost happened the following year, but like it would have been a much better the bonus the year before, because by then my motivation was crashing. My energy levels were not the same due to like yoga and meditation falling off and like way too many abortive relationships. You just like, basically it's like, here's my energy in a bucket. There you go.
Right.
Oh man, aren't we feeling good?
Yeah.
Nobody feels good about that.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, there's a real argument for purity of motives with this kind of stuff. Did you learn a lesson?
I think that ultimately it gave me the opportunity to do what I'm doing now. There was a combination of there being another opportunity to kind of go to a new tier at that job, that ultimately the very, 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 very short of it was that I don't think they were serious enough about the position relative to the energy that would have been required from me to do it.
The compensation wasn't there, and was the creativity there?
I think probably not. I mean, ultimately, it appeared on face value, yes, but I think ultimately it just would have been a pit. It would not have been a situation that made sense. And ultimately, I respected my coworkers too much to take the position as well. So so there was that angle, and then the rest was just saving up money. Like, I needed to have a level of finances that I was comfortable with in order to endeavor on this. And so it just became a consequence, or there were certain things that I was doing in order to survive, and everything, ultimately worked out in the end. I don't think I never got to the point where it was like so grinding that something traumatic happened that left a scar. But it was definitely a long period of exceeding patience and just recognizing that, there may have been times where it was like, well, maybe this is okay, and just recognizing that no, there's never a time when this is okay. Like it has to end, and it's going to end at this point, and you're going to move on, and there's no version of this where it doesn't end,
So do you feel your life moved off the grid when you did that, or how long did it take to degrid yourself, if so?
That's a great question.
Well, it was such a uniquely surreal, could potentially be described as psychedelic experience, in that I put in my 2 weeks notice March 1st, and then March 13th, the entire company left the office. So it wasn't just like me
Wasn't just your
leaving.
last day.
It was like, if I don't work here, nobody works here, you know?
Wow,
And nobody...
were they let go, or?
No. I mean, like COVID, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
COVID closed the city on March 13th.
yeah.
Which
So
was
Last
Mike's
day.
last day.
yeah, and so they haven't returned to work since. I mean, they're still working. They're working remotely.
Yeah.
But as far as the degridding situation, you know, I was very much both separate from everybody's experience, but in the same experience that everybody was having with respect to degridding, you know? So it's just that I didn't have any external forces telling me that I had to plug in to some facsimile of the grid, you know? It was just exclusively my own decision making for 3 months. Well, you know, our decision making.
Uh-huh.
So there was a period of degridding in a way that I think was more coronavirus related than work related, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, prior to this, we've been getting up at 5:30 every day, but prior to, you know, for the 3 months, much of the 3 months leading up to starting the project, I was going to bed at 5:30. You know, it was a complete flippening where they're, you know, waking up at 2 or something and doing yoga, which has been great. I was doing it 5 days a week for a few months.
Awesome.
All restorative stuff, basically to keep me limber for this computer work I was doing at the time. I made a feature film out of 80s music videos and commercials and whatnot.
What?
And made a bunch of
So
music
great.
as well to go along with it. And so, yeah, that was kind of the main thrust, along with preparing ourselves on the podcast/audio side. We did a lot of 360 videos of different locations in the city. We did our first 5 or so podcasts without doing walks and things like that. So,
But here, like, we're talking about degridding, and do you really think that you've degridded, or is what, like, this is on paper, these things, like making a feature film out of clips from 80s movies is a creative venture, but the way that you did it with giving yourself a deadline and working on it every day and doing yoga in order to sit at the computer, is that degridding? What, you know what I mean? Because you're still giving yourself these things to do, and it's still related to how we're doing these walks, where we have the podcast and we have the videos and we have the photos and the stickers and all these things that are creative and we like them and they give us energy and fuel. But are we off the grid? You know, are we just using electric power now instead of the gas, like we kind of spoke about earlier? Off camera, no one knows what we're talking about. But are we finally using clean energy, but we're still using energy to be on the grid?
I think
And do we even know if we leave the grid?
we need to define the terms of the grid. You know, it's such a broad thing.
Yeah.
In some respects, yes. In some respects, no. If I think about what the grid means relative to how I brought it up earlier, the idea of being okay with presentness in its truest version. And does presentness involve creation? Yes, it can at oftentimes. And I think a lot of given that the movie that I made is, I think, you know, intentionally / necessarily / I'm very aware of the fact that it can quite literally go nowhere. I mean, it is all stolen content. There's not a shred of it that isn't something that is bastardized from something else. So it's like in the way that, like, sampling music is, you know, something that, where there was a period of time where there was a runway where in hip hop you could put out things that were sampled by, and now it's much more, you need to pay for it and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was very much about this idea in my head and making it happen. And I want to show it to people, and we'll show it to people, but there's not much future for it, you know? So in that respect, it was present, you know? But some of these other things that we're doing and being on the grid, it's a little more ambiguous because we're making all these things. I'd like to see them reach a broader audience. Success becomes murkier and essentially can become more and more baiting depending on how successful it becomes. You have to be continually mindful. I mean, right now, I think our videos get 10 views or something like that, despite all of our efforts to tag them appropriately. And, I think that's
But
good.
that's great. That's 10 people that are engaging. Even one view means that we've spoken to one person and we've had a conversation. And even just, thinking about it in metrics and numbers, once we start doing that, then we're thinking about all of these interactions that we're having as just a number on
Yes.
a spreadsheet.
Jesse and I have a continuing dialogue with respect to viewership, and Jesse is exceptionally mindful with respect to valuing the view. And I don't have any problems with that. I think that I would like to be able to continue to create an environment where it can grow organically. And that requires a lot of pre-production, post-production, a lot of mindfulness around a situation that might not potentially occur,
Well,
And so that can be anxiety rising in anybody to think that I'm doing all this work, why is it not resulting in anything? And you just, you need to be very careful about those types of thoughts.
that's meditation, right? But that's also the grid. I mean, in a neural sense, the grid is the neural canyoning of stimuli that we have introduced to the brain that creates these similar pattern lines. So it's just you take a brain out of one work context, it'll rapidly reassemble a different higher valence, higher positive affect version of that work in a new context. So putting you out of that into production for videos, maybe a lot of the same type of work and even the same environment, but to a different aim. And that can be great if the aim is true and if it's aligned with what we want to do. There's also the potential for deliberately scrambling the neurons. So restorative yoga is good because it combines meditation in there as well. It's just building up a level of energy in the brain without anywhere that it automatically goes. And then once that energy is big enough through whatever mean, whether it's yoga or tantric sex or meditation or amazing art that just shifts your conceptions of reality or a massive dose of psychedelics, you get a lot of energy in the brain with nowhere to go. Then it starts creating new shortest distances between point A and point B that can oxbow some of the redundant coils that were maybe necessary to sculpt your brain to the bureaucracy of your prior existence.
Yeah.
Or, that was honing the product of your mind to work in a bureaucracy to produce products within a larger team that now no longer exists. So you just cut to the core of it through any of those more rhythmic or more limbic code rewriting software.
Yeah, well, I think that the movie that resonates with me with respect to the movie because spent 6 years plus making other people's visions come to fruition. It was very much a production role that I was doing.
Yeah.
There were aspects that I contributed creatively, and also I had a voice and a stake in what was going on, but it was very much a facilitator role.
You were herding the cats.
And I was very, very satisfied with that for that period of time and learned a tremendous amount and could potentially return to that. But the movie making, the movie making decision was exclusively decision making that was mine, and mine alone. And so it was perhaps an orgy of that for those, that period of time. And it was very pleasurable to be able to make all those decisions and to see it unfold and to have a vision that was uniquely my own without having to have any mitigating opinions, I'm going to leapfrog off this to something else. With respect to the walking, something that's so fantastic about it, vis-a-vis the potentially negative feelings associated with striving to do so many things at once. This is something that Jesse, I Jessie can certainly speak for herself, but I don't believe she has a problem with.
What is it?
Relative to something that I have a problem
What
with.
is it?
The suffering from depression as a consequence of not doing enough or not accomplishing, or just a sense of incompleteness relative to pursuing your own things. And the thing about the walking that's so great, which was something that I had a theory about prior to starting this, and it's been great to feel validated, is that that doesn't exist. Despite any anxieties or maybe an overwhelming sense of there being a lot to do, the physical nature of it is this like stunningly powerful yet subtle thing that occurs where it just fills in that dip. And it's a thing where it's like, I notice it only insofar as like, oh, there would normally be this thing here, and this thing isn't here. And that's really interesting. And hopefully I don't, we're on a wood table so I can knock on it, and, hopefully that doesn't come at some point. But I'm pretty confident that it's, that the physicality, it just does so much for the body in terms of alertness. I don't feel like I need to nap at any point during the day, where it's like when you're in the normal course of a day, I feel like all I want to do is nap.
Endorphins.
And, I think it's more much like if you don't have caffeine for a while or something like that, and then you have it, and then you like feel it more alertly. If we only go for occasional walks, I feel it in like the first 15 or 20 minutes. It's like, wow, I feel great, like I'm ready to tackle the day. I don't necessarily feel that when I do it now, but that's only because like my system is just running on this, and it expects this. And it's,
and you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Your day is completely scheduled out, and it builds this like it's not low level, it just builds integrity. I said I was going to do this.
Right.
I did this thing that I said I was going to do. It does matter what that thing is. If you've justified it in like the sense of some larger meaning making, and then you did what you said you were going to do, that's a success. So it doesn't matter the ripple effects.
Yeah.
Especially like because so much of meaning is actually meaning by consensus, or like memed desires from like other people create kind of the depression relations. It's like, oh, I don't look like Kim Kardashian, or I don't look like this or that, or I'm not rich like these people, or I'm not influential like one of the 20 Congress people that are the only ones we hear about in the news.
Right.
It's all very selected, and then you like just get a little bit of distance from that, and it's like, wait a second, everything that is so meaningful that I'm told is so meaningful, like what is the meaning that I'm creating in my life? Like what is the core that I truly would support in a vacuum without outside stimuli? It seems like the walking must be super good for that.
I think so, yeah. And I mean, I admire people that can have the narrowest of accomplishments thresholds. If just licking an envelope and closing it was something that could fulfill me for an entire day, that would be incredibly impressive, And so the trouble then becomes, if that means that if you can fulfill yourself through that, what are you doing with the rest of your time? Because there are so many snares that can make it so that is no longer fulfilling. And with the walk, that was what you expressed was something that is something we communicated to other people when we were doing our vacation walks, which is the A to B nature of going from a destination to another destination was so inherently fulfilling that we didn't need to be doing anything else. And we don't necessarily, maybe the fact that we return to the same point every day is a little bit mitigating in that, but I don't think so. I just think that it's this ongoing conversation that I know I'm having with myself, where I'm not a mystic and I'm not asleep. I want to be somewhere in between. I don't want to be a mystic because either we deem to put ourselves in this body, or we are just happen to be in this body, and we should feel okay with experiencing craziness and like the wildness of the world. And so, while I have this body, while it's well functioning, I want to be okay with myself that I try and pursue all these things, and and not necessarily think that it just has to be about the present moment walking. It can be about other things. You just have to be mindful, much like your job, me at my job, mindful that you don't let the pursuit overwhelm you, and let it enrich you,
Are you saying that you do feel accomplished at the end of the day? Like, do you feel that same? Because that feeling that we've talked about, and this is backing us up just a little bit, but that feeling when we're on vacation where all we have to do is walk gives me the sense of accomplishment at the end of the day. And I don't actually feel that now. I feel at the end of the day, I've walked 26 miles and I know that I still have more to do. And like, that is bizarre, right? Like, that's a bizarre feeling that I don't feel at the end of the day when we finish walking a marathon. Now, I don't feel accomplished.
There's an inculcation there though, right? Like, it's because there's a vacation walk and a work walk. So you've already made the distinction in your brain. That distinction is operating as like a governing layer for what you're doing. And so your sense of meaning making is on impact or effect or some larger thing that is outside of the present moment. So you'd have to actually climb up the ladder of your mind and make specific point alterations to that layer in order to harvest that sense of satisfaction, because that sense of satisfaction is coming from like a higher layer of abstraction within your psyche. And then you could probably knock that out in a day or two, like if you really honed it,
Yeah, well, now that we're talking about it, I'm like realizing that this is my current truth. And I've got to make a game plan for how to get that back.
Well, we exist in subtle dimensions that go far beyond what consensus reality views as true. I mean, consensus reality is just the exact center of the bell curve that is going to monetize the most minds and attentions. And then it goes like, the national level is the narrowest in the center, and then the local level gets a little bit broader, and then like individuals talking and blogging, has all the 10,000 things under the sun. But the act of just walking can be incredibly productive if it somehow opens me up to these subtle realities where there's suddenly awareness in all of my joints. There's this like tingling that's like flowing into my leg, into my toes. Like, if I'm aware of my whole body as I'm just walking, that brings so much peace and calm to those around me. And it actually starts like, it can set up a flow where my crown opens and I'm just like connected to a stream of like thoughts that synthesize my thinking, and that gives me a courage or a sense of sureness that is louder than any of my any moral failings that I've accomplished, or any senses of like not enoughness that's in my mind. Like, it trumps, no relation intended. It overarcs anything that's happening on the mental level if I can truly commit to not having those distractions come up. And I get the sense too that like those distractions or those threats are like the predation of the work world, or the working for tomorrow, or the wise ant and the foolish grasshopper, or like whatever fable you want to do, is the mind trying to reassert itself, threatened by the potentiality of these fields. But I will challenge you that you're not a mystic and that you don't do that, because you too have love. So like anywhere that love is present and the courage of convictions is present, and operating and sculpting your life deliberately from a higher level of abstractions, like PCCC does, that you have crafted and that you adhere to in integrity, that is mystical.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really weird that it's not common, but it's not common, and so that has an effect on reality and taps you into different streams.
Yeah.
PCCC referencing the Project Pillars, by the way, for those that aren't familiar with it. I won't challenge back. I think that it's more that it isn't the focus. I mean, it would be lovely to get to a place where we are existing and that mysticism is happening without us actively like asserting mysticism onto the world, I think that's probably where the ultimate mysticism comes from. Right now, I think we're still in this sorting phase.
Yeah.
And I agree that I think our love actualized through this project could be mystical energy for others, and we'd be super happy to share that. I don't even really think, not share it for our benefit. I mean, ultimately the sharing is a benefit, so it's just about getting there. And how to get there, it doesn't feel like directly charting that path is the way that makes sense to me. It feels more like we need to get our own internal priorities straight, and then it'll unfold, if it will at all.
These are simple things that we all come back to. Certainly that I'm coming back to. It all revolves around love and integrity. Like love and integrity seem to be those internal pillars, and like everything gets sculpted around that. Like, do you do what you say you're going to do? Do you represent who you actually are? And do you care deeply for yourself? Do you care deeply for others? Do you care deeply for the world? So the integrity is kind of like a vertical pillar within the self, right? Like I am internally consistent. I know what is true and what is false. I know where I am true and where I am false. I am like thus choosing truth rather than this like convoluted system of justifications. And then love is just like basically how big your body is, like what your sense of self is. I think the Rosicrucians have a 3-axis cross. There's like an X, Y, and Z axis. There's the vertical of the cross beam, which is just like the God to Earth, or the frequency of vibration axis. So your frequency axis is the vertical. The horizontal is extending out on your level to the human world. So like all the humans in your community, everything that you can interact with as a human. So we're not talking ultraviolet, we're not talking infrared, but like that yummy spectrum in between where we like live out our days and like store our stimuli in these like gushy gray boxes and like go it out. And then there's a rose sprouting out of the center of the cross beams, which is the Z axis, which is love emanating. So like,
oh wow.
So you're choosing to align the vertical with the horizontal, and then emanating out into it to give it depth and a third dimension with love. And I think that is actually necessary to accomplish anything in the world. Oh wow, yeah, that's wild. So what we're seeing right now in an outer reality, after capitalism has like found its like greatest overreach, is that it's beginning to collapse, because there's not enough love to harness, to burn as fuel, to embalm as products and services. That world is starting to become more and more cartoonish, two-dimensional, flat, and that love is starting to like really manifest and take on its own power of its own, whether that's like the wounded mother like finally like stepping up for her rights, or whatever that is. It no longer is subsistent to be like the teat that is suckling the world. It's like it's stepping up, and because it is withdrawing, the structures, even though they seem like big and nasty, they're looking more and more cartoonish by the day, these structures that subsist upon extracted love. But then the people who get co-opted and like run into these filter bubbles are also become flatter by the day, that they withdraw from the love that animates and creates that third dimension. Yeah. So that's kind of like a space-time continuum in like Rosicrucian metaphysics, but it seems relevant.
It is relevant.
And relevant to the grid.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Go on.
Sorry, I'm also thinking about the grid in relation to that, where it's the avenues and the streets, and then the buildings are like the trying to be that vertical bar where they're trying to get closer to the God, and they're never going to get there, but they're trying, and they're using these like love axis lines to try and propel themselves up.
We broke our backs lifting Moloch to heaven when Moloch was everywhere. When heaven is everywhere, not Moloch.
Did you read the essay on that as well?
No.
There's a wonderful. I'll send you the essay on like Moloch, meditations on Moloch.
Yeah.
It's like 14 points on that poem, But yeah, I mean, Ginsberg beat me to the punch. I thought I was innovating when I thought concrete cocks, but granite cocks is a line in in Moloch. Granite cocks, and that's what they are. It's just it's the phallic principle writ large. Also, one of the more efficient uses of space in a very space-constrained island. So let's not.
No, it's also.
It's all penises.
It's not all
Fuck the
conceptual
patriarchy.
like that, but-
Bring them down. We must have highly inefficient underground womb bunkers. It's the only way to save ourselves. There is a functional reason. I fucking hate the Bauhaus too. It's how many discs can we cram per cubic centiliter of Mirkersmau? But
I love the Bauhaus so much.
I got the Bauhaus. Bauhaus. I'm so Art Deco. I'm give me filigree and Baroque excess. Yes.
Well, you know what I love about the
Twister.
Bauhaus
Yeah.
though is how it's where the women came in. And I hate it at the same time because the women came in as partners to their male counterparts.
Yeah.
All Annie Albers was Joseph Albers' wife, and then they all were just in the photos, the way they're remembered. But they also were teachers and learners on their own, and all the textiles that came out of the Bauhaus are
Frank Lloyd Wright and his design's pretty rad. I like it on the individual dwelling level.
Yeah.
I even like it on the some skyscrapers level.
Yeah.
I just wish it weren't a unification point of design simplicity and cost efficiency.
That's fair.
That we got stuck there for a century,
and
as we
yeah,
have.
and we're definitely still there.
Because cost efficiency, shareholder capital, send it all to the people who confound reality and buy islands and go fly out the Russian ballet team to party. A whole bunch of Bruce Waynes without Batman.
Fantastic.
That's our new theme song.
That's fantastic. I want to say one more thing with respect to presentness before we should talk about the actual walk itself.
Yeah.
I think we've been doing good so far, and anybody who stopped listening has stopped listening, so we don't need to worry about that.
Timestamps
Yes,
for
that's right. Yeah. Anyway, the one of the things that I thought about before we started the walk, and it's something that I was pretty adamant about in my thought process, and also pretty adamant about when we started even talking about the project, was having space where nothing happened. And I wanted to have every Monday be a day where there was no sort of extracurriculars with the project, and it would just be exclusively about walking. And that included not taking any photos, which people were well, what if you see something that is exceptional? And then it's a question of well, then it's exceptional, and that's just the way it is. It doesn't,
Right.
nothing more happens with it. And it's been very convenient and easy to just start taking pictures because whatever, it's just taking pictures. And then putting the stickers up has been oh yeah, well, you can just put stickers up. It's not like you're filming or anything, but it becomes very much it doesn't matter that the action might be small. What's going on in here is very different. The action's very large in here.
And you have access to the stickers and the pictures, and it's a gateway to the rest of taking yourself out of that present moment.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. That was something we said.
And so, I think we probably need to return to that Mondays not doing anything at a minimum, and then seeing how anxiety levels feel the rest of the week, and then evaluating, well, how important are all these things to do versus the act of not doing. And also with respect to the days that you're walking with me, making it that there is a minimum of things that are happening while we're walking, and then maybe I spend more of the time doing these tasks that I feel I want to do on the days that are just me.
Well, I think that the more that you guys can make it a meditation, the more successful the project will be.
Yeah.
Game A thinking is this hyper competitive grid system where everyone is just fighting for mind share and then inserting products into the void. It's a lower trust value.
Right.
Because people are inundated with different messages and how do I trust this thing? How do I trust that? But if you can really render it as a living, walking pilgrimage, like walking meditations, whatever Zen Buddhism, like with your consciousness deepening with every step, then you are actively fighting Moloch. Then you're actively creating a different stream. And if people recognize that stream, it's not even if people recognize that stream, there are forces that will support you that recognize that stream and are like searching for a truth value that they can believe in. It's like Obama's first campaign. It's like hope, faith, love, trust, poster, like, but it's not an advertisement. It's like if it's something that's felt with every step, then that is counterculture. That is truly that's a sideways vector. That's not even like protest, counter protest. It's like living as the change, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a cool venture. I just think, you know, in like Bushwick, some of my favorite times were like learning how to run where I was so conscious of every step that like each impact brought a little shimmer of white light down my leg. And it wasn't every time, and I knew when it was, and it's like I floated somehow when that was happening. And I don't know how in some way, but like that made my interaction with monks better. And my whole life has been the passage of thread through a series of needles, you know? Like I haven't gotten any job that I applied for.
Right.
It's all been through different connections and Slumdog Millionaire coincidences, and most of them predicated on a specific kind of feeling or immersion of feeling. And I think that can work for anybody. I'm pretty sure it's not because I'm like the special potato of the spud factory.
Well, you are a special potato, but there's a lot of us out there. I mean, I'm a special potato
You're
too.
A special
I think
potato
I have a similar story with my life work situation. We have a similar potato. In a way.
With respect to like getting to the point of full presentness in the walk, it is, I guess there's two things. One, I'm a little concerned that I would be setting myself up for failure because I don't know if I could get there. But I think that's kind of a minor concern, and also like you don't know until you try. And then the second thing is that I do think that as far as the doing aspect, I think I'm out of the first gear, which I think is doing for others in order to receive validation. I think I'm in a new gear, whether second, third, fourth, I don't know what it is, which is doing it for myself because I only have so much time here, and I like to be able to test myself and to do things and to like feel the experience and the validation of maintaining the integrity that you referenced, you know? But I do at the same time think that ultimate gear is the presentness of doing it. And so I'm stuck in that place where I don't want to feel negative feelings about myself for not getting to that place or not aspiring to that place all the time, and feeling okay and comfortable and feeling like this is a true expression of humanity, to be satisfied with doing things for my own impressiveness, you know, to be impressed with my own sense of will and spiritual energies, you know. So how that manifests with respect to all of these video game-like tasks that we've accumulated, making videos, making podcasts, putting stickers up, how that reckoning comes, you know, we're only in week 7 of presumably 52. So
we're still early.
This will manifest further in different versions, and hopefully continually better ones.
We're all chipping away at the marble.
Yeah. We should talk about the route. We've done such a wonderful time talking about the grid.
We've talked about the grid, which is the route.
Yeah.
But the actual route, when we break it down,
the buildings around here are not, you know, I'm very much a Brooklyn person, and this environment is not the Brooklyn environment, unless you're maybe in downtown Brooklyn for a small section.
Yeah.
the skyscrapers thing is not a thing that resonates with me other than a visiting perspective.
Yeah.
So it has resonated with me to some degree.
Although you said you like Art Deco when we said Bauhaus, and I like Art Deco as well, and there is so much Art Deco around here that, looking at the skyline and looking up at the skyscrapers is one thing. Okay, they're big buildings, but when you're walking on street level and you see inside the lobby of many of these older skyscrapers, and they have colorful tiles.
I love it. It's when America believed in something. It's when we stood for something. Progress, efficiency, the will of man. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great to see.
That's when you ring the doorbell, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Hello. How may I help you?
So, but what I identified was, I think I found a section that resonates with me most. And it might be that the virus is having a real impact on the number of people that are out on the street at any time. I mean, Times Square is a ghost town at worst, and then like a smattering of people at best.
Yeah.
But the section that has really stood out to me is Park Avenue between like 45th and 55th, right outside of Grand Central, the back end of Grand Central, and the Helmsley building. From there to 55, and there isn't any, like, aside from Grand Central, that's where, like, you know, the road stops at the Helmsley building. There isn't, to my knowledge, I'm sure there is a lot of history about those buildings, but there isn't. It's not like Empire State Building, Chrysler Building, you know. It's just a strip of very tall buildings, and there's something about it that really condenses for me the experience of the city in the most pleasant version. And it's all, I think it's all like office buildings too. It's not like, there aren't really any, if there are commercial or like, you know, like a Chopped, or, you know, if there are those types of stores, they're very organically built into the building, so you don't really notice it. It's all about the buildings and nothing about like things that serve the buildings. It's a very pure in a way, but also not. It doesn't have that kind of there is no spot in Midtown that feels Soviet. So this is a very poor word.
The man in the gray flannel
it's not
suit.
all the same. Yeah, it's not all repetitive,
Yeah.
but it has like some unification, and it doesn't feel like the small capitalist jerks are like trying to grab your attention, right?
Yeah.
You're able to walk through and sort of
I don't know.
flow.
There's just something about it, and it only lasts, like I said, for like 10 blocks, maybe even less, before it goes back to something different.
I mean, that's what we look for in our newscasters and our pop musicians and certain celebrities, is like this kind of nondescript beingness that like we just ascribe a quality to. Like if we actually recognized it as something we knew, we couldn't identify the city with it, right? It's just this vibe.
Yeah.
And like any like monster cock would ricochet us out of the vibe-ness. It'd just be like about that one thing.
Right. Yeah, I think so. So it was cool to kind of find the spot for me that made the most sense within Midtown. Do you want to just go up and down the avenues?
Sure.
So First Avenue, we have the United Nations, which I had never walked by until we did a trial walk in October of last year, just to identify that we could do the mileage.
Yeah.
And we walked past it then.
Yeah.
And so we've been walking past it all this week, and it's interesting to be around there when there's no coronavirus, or when the coronavirus is there, because there's no tourists or anything like that.
There's normally like a long line of people waiting to get in, people that work there, but then also they do tours.
Yeah.
So there's usually groups wanting to get in.
But it is between that and 11th Avenue. It's the only spots in the Midtown section where the sun gets in. And that's actually been nice, because I've had to apply sunblock so much these past, 7 weeks.
Totally.
That
I probably need to also.
Yeah.
I mean, in this area, you can get away with, I only apply once or twice, whereas opposed to every 2 hours.
I'm the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Yeah.
I'm like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Like you turn your phaser to me, I'm gonna fry.
Yeah, we have some in the bag. We'll get you some.
Yeah.
And so that's the big highlight of First Avenue. There's Second Avenue.
Yeah, Second Avenue feels residential and like a little town. Like it feels like more like a little town. The buildings are a little shorter.
Yeah.
There's like small bagel stores and small coffee shops and that kind of thing, and not like the massive Starbucks. There's also a lot of hospitals over there. So we've been noticing, like First and Second Avenue, we've been noticing all the people going to work in their scrubs.
Yeah.
Which is also something we've been wondering what the
Yeah.
ethics and the moral or like the cleanliness
I
of
did-
wearing scrubs on the subway.
I did look up an article yesterday, or a couple of articles with respect to that, because in my our low information virology minds, it seems to me that wearing your scrubs to and from work is an opportunity to invite the virus in and take the virus out. There was an article from 2018 that put a damper on those ideas.
Oh, really?
And then an article, but it was like pre-coronavirus.
Yeah.
And then an article from April where somebody was, in a funny way, and funny insofar as they didn't want to attack the integrity of essential workers, but like just kind of putting out the question there, like, is this responsible for people to be doing this? But there was no definitive response from that person. It seems to me like if there is any possible risk, why do it? And it also struck me as one of those things where it's like, they used leeches to suck the blood out of people. Like it strikes me as one of those things where like 50 years ago, like they wore their clothes that they're out on the street into the why did they do that?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
But I
the
don't
reality.
think, like, if you're saying it's taking away from like the integrity of the essential workers, I don't think that. I think it's like whoever is making the rules maybe needs to just consider it.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't put this on like each nurse or doctor individually.
No, but apparently, people have been maybe going at them, on the street for like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
One thing that we've noticed, I think that is really interesting, disheartening about the city relative to Manhattan relative to other boroughs, the lack of bathrooms in this section of town that are publicly available is
Because
striking.
we're sitting in front of a bathroom, actually. Which
That's
is
locked,
funny.
though.
Oh, it is locked.
Yeah, virus.
It is.
But in other boroughs, we've been able to use the bathroom at parks and playgrounds, no problem.
So there's one in St. Vartan Park, which is between First and Second, which is why I bring it up. But that is very down and out of the way on our route. And really, the only bathrooms that are available are Grand Central, Penn Station, and Port Authority. Port Authority and Penn Station are very close to each other. So it's almost, in the grand scheme, they're like 9 blocks away, but 1 avenue away. And relative to people having access to bathrooms, it's, I don't understand how, I guess it's because, pay to play. During normal circumstances, maybe I wouldn't think about it as much because I could go into a Starbucks,
Where's
buy
your
a
office
bottle
bathroom?
of water.
Where's your coffee shops? They have
Right.
bathrooms.
Macy's, JCPenney, all those stores have bathrooms.
Yeah.
But
I had to desperately go to the bathroom yesterday without getting into too much detail, and was able to convince a young gentleman at the desk on Madison Avenue of my personal humanity, and he allowed me to use the restroom without any kickback at all. I think he recognized that there's no reason that I should have been in this office building lobby if it wasn't urgent that I use their restroom.
No, it makes sense. I've only gotten one public urination ticket, but I've peed many times in public. I'm also, I'm fine for doing a lot of things in public that I won't mention here. But I think it'd be a fun game. You go like down into the end of like subway terminals, and like most people won't get you. It's not a very expensive ticket either, and for the satisfaction versus a non-zero chance that you'll be given a citation. Generally, the citation, the satisfaction generated is worth more than that non-zero amount after counting in the fines. So I do leave my urine. I do leave my urine in public places. And perhaps it does diminish the quality of life just that much for everybody. So it may be a tragedy of the commons kind of thing. But you can argue that the tragedy of the commons has already come and gone. And also I've drunk my own urine, and it is sterile for 30 minutes afterwards. If you drink enough water, it's kind of a nice Pilsner.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like electrolytes. It tastes like like Gatorade without sugar.
This might be something that comes up on a particularly far-flung route. You know?
Yeah.
So thank you for
Drink
that
plenty of
information.
water.
Yeah.
You don't. This was like right. I
You
was
want to
like
drink a lot of water.
wearing a dress, and I'd just gone to the mermaid parade,
Yeah.
and I was on a little bit of mushrooms.
Yeah.
And I got dared to do this by somebody in a stand-up comedy routine.
Oh, it's all coming together.
Yeah. So I did it. It was a good day.
So then there's 3rd Avenue, which it's one of the few spots in the entirety of this route that has that neighborhoody vibe. You know, we're kind of in the other area, which is 9th and 10th Avenue for sections. Although jumping ahead, 10th Avenue, there's a certain point down here where it gets like the next generation of skyscrapers is like very weird.
Yeah.
It's like there are these buildings that kind of like angle down to the street, and there's no like all the shopping is inside of the building. But it was like there's this one particular section which I think I took some video of, and I'll play it over this now, where I was like, where am I? What's going on? This is like Gattaca or something.
I like that it punches through the Robert Moses chastity belt, protecting the city from the water.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You used to not want to be by the water because the water was stinky in the 1800s.
Right.
It smelled really bad.
And now it's a little less stinky, right?
Well, it's a little less stinky, but it's also like a reminder of nature. Because like Central Park is like all the Stepford wives of all like the billionaires. It's like perfectly kind of manicured and like square, and it's like a Brazilian wax of like nature.
Right.
You know, it's just like, here it is.
Right. This is nature, I swear. I promise. This is what it's like out there. Don't leave the island. This is your nature.
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
We're going to Central Park next week, by the way.
Yeah. This week we just touch the tip of Central Park. We don't actually go into Central Park.
No.
Yeah. But you know, I think that like it's not necessarily a permanent shift in city center. The city center was like World Trade Center area before 9/11, and then that got kablooied, and then it shifted to Midtown, and that was the city center for a while, and Midtown's getting kind of tired, and now Hudson Yards, it's not quite the center, but it shifts it to at least a view of the water and an understanding that New York is also part of a natural environment.
Right.
Crossing my fingers.
Right. Well, and it does come in a time when people are interested in pretending like they're being good to the earth. Greenwashing is all the rage these days.
Yeah.
I would find the hardest part for me on the walk this week were the named streets, because they were deceptive.
Why?
You know, the rest of the route, it counts in numbers.
Well, they're
Yeah.
not real avenues.
Well,
No.
Lexington merges with 3rd downtown. Madison merges with 5th downtown, and Park actually replaces 4th.
Huh.
So I guess Midtown is just like the widest part of the island.
Yeah. I mean, for a thing that's such a grid, you know, it would appear like we're walking to 1st to 11th, but we're not. We're walking 1st to 2nd, and then we're walking 3 name streets, and then we're walking 5th to 11th.
Well, we
so
walk
it's
on
like,
3rd.
yeah.
1,
I'm
2,
sorry,
3.
you're right. Yeah. So it's just disquieting for the mind, and also like you think like, oh, I only have a couple of more avenues to go, but no, there's like this chunk of 3 in the middle that really you have to kind of grind through one way or the other.
Yeah.
I
I
found
actually like that part the most, I think.
good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. It seems like it's easier for me coming from 11th and working down rather than there's something about it being in the earlier part of the day, because essentially once you're done with those routes, you are halfway through the day. but you're not halfway through the numbered streets. But if you're going from 11th down, it feels much more like an actual halfway to get to 5th. I don't know. It's weird. Just walking on the grid for this long of a distance, it just totally is weird what your idea of like half full and half empty is.
Yeah, time doesn't really, it really gets like silly putty.
Kind of sad that I'll be bouncing off before we get into that dilation point, but hopefully I'll be able to join you when you're
back and
solidly weirded.
Yeah, yeah. And you might experience it too, because I feel like even just in a few back and forths, you're like disoriented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So speeding way along, then we're in Times Square. Oh, we should talk about Grand Central just a little bit, just because it's a beautiful interior.
Yeah, Grand Central is such a beautiful place. I feel like the first 5-6 years I lived in New York, anytime I'd be in Grand Central, it was so important to me to like look like a New Yorker and like not be looking around and not look like a tourist and go to the gate that I need to go to get on the train to get out of the city so I can come back into the city and speed through it again and not admire the city that I've chosen to live in. But now I go into Grand Central, and if you actually look up, it's amazing. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Penn Station used to be like that too, and now
it's not. They made a poor choice there.
It's like a urinal. It's like a Duchamp.
And then from there, we go past Madison Square Garden, and we hit Times Square. We hit Times Square, and Times Square similarly is
Times
empty.
Square is just empty right now.
Except
the naked cowboy is still there. Thank God.
Yes.
We saw 2 people taking a picture with him the other day, and like they're wearing their masks and trying to stay away from him, and he just grabbed them both and pulled them in and took off his mask. And it's like, I mean, I guess if you're taking a picture with the naked cowboy, that's just what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You
I am
gotta
a
be
disease
ready
vector.
for it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Konnichiwa!
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad.
They have there's a poster right up now for John Lewis, sponsored by Coca-Cola. It's nice to see John Lewis being honored in some way. It's a little conflicting that Coca-Cola's name is at the top of it.
Yeah.
So I actually catered Coca-Cola's 125th anniversary, which also was the same year of the 125th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island.
Oh, wow.
And as the Coca-Cola executives were emerging from the ferry to take them to Liberty Island to celebrate freedom and Coke, in their red suits, like red Coca-Cola suits,
Right.
the DJ, in some fit of like transcendent splendor, played Strange Fruits.
Oh my God.
Killer Coke indeed.
Wow.
From the poplar trees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did people pick up on it? You picked up on it?
I
but do
picked
you
up
think
on
other
it holding my
people-
tray of champagne. I was
Yeah.
just like, I love that I am having this life experience. This really rounds out the incarnation.
Yeah, that's wild. I think that covers it for now.
Yeah.
I would like to hear you freestyle rap.
Well, what are the topics? What's the topic?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I guess definitely the grid.
I was going to say bagels.
Bagels.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I was gonna take it back into what we had been talking about earlier with the being present and letting the third vector of love emanate.
Do you need more topics, or is that
No,
sufficient?
Is that too many topics?
No, that's pretty good.
Okay.
That's pretty good. So we got the grid, bagels, and letting the third vector of love emanate.
Yes.
One of these things is just like the others. That's a good vector.
A fountain has just come to life
That is
directly
a vector
behind
of
the
love
camera.
right there.
Just right as you started singing.
And it's a seal.
Without further ado, walking on the grid in the COVID times, if you want to get my mind in the Midtown grind, yeah, I like coffee, but I don't drink that. Take it all fat if you want to chop that, yo, chow mein. getting in the brain in Chinatown, but that's right down the drain, cause we're going in the 9 to 5 and stay alive. We're going in the grid to thrive, and if you wanna high-five me, yo, it's a rhyming Simon, getting on my stuff cause I'm 5 and diamond, getting the bagel and I'm busting the locks, take a little bit of this, doing more than talk, we can walk it with a creamy cheese spread. If you wanna get every word that he said, she said, we doing it too, cause it comes with 2 for 1. If you wanna get a deal, Baker's dozen done, boom. Yeah, that's a 13 if you wanna do that, yo. And the floor you never seen in the skyscraper building going up, up high, but you gotta get good luck or you're gonna die. Shit, no, I didn't say that. Gotta quit this, gotta wear your mask if you're gonna resist the censorship. No, we can enter this spaceship and blast off like a granite cock down to parts unknown. Hail to the throne. Patriarchy never gonna be alone because the grid owns you. If you wanna take it, no, the grid loans you out for a day and then you get a little bit of this and give it back. Is you gonna work every day a trap? It's a trap! What? Macaulay Culkin, now you're home alone. Now are the words that I've spoken, the spoke of the wheel, it rolls around, getting in the grid like a spiral uptown, downtown. It's a vortex of world capital. Yeah, we got this stuff, financial capital. This is kind of Babylon, a world capital. Now I'm gonna Babylon because we're trapped it all. Now it all comes around, goes around. The Federal Reserve gives a free lunch down. Uptown, pound it with the Amtrak. SL line, you get a little bit, my ass is on the line too. Boom, DC, New York, it's a zoo. And if you wanna come through, then you come through. And if you wanna cut through red tape like Kung Fu, then you gotta do that stuff like Jiu-Jitsu. You know that stuff, the ninjutsu, the force is in you. So if you wanna see this, you gotta course and then view. Boom, get it straight through because a grid is just 2 dimensions. And if you gonna be compressed into a cartoon, if you wanna get that far noon, you gotta understand when you getting in high noon to chopped or whatever salad venture you go for. If you wanna do this stuff, no, you get your order taken, wound in a long line with people in the same blue suits checking all time. Yeah, trapped in the grid, tick tick tock, how many spokes at the wheel does it take to stop? If you're gonna break the drop and drop the 9 to 5, you got to stay alive and not lobotomized by a robotic time that goes in the grid line, that cuts in the mind and gets that stuff left behind. Yeah, some dead end of evolution that preys on the mother and sows more confusion in the grid making, the grid factory that replicates Midtown to infinity, insanity, humanity, divinity will break through if you let it spin with ease. Sin in me? No, some apple of Eden, some Apple Store cathedral that we have been seeing, we eaten. Yo, some kind of plastic, acrostic, acoustic. Yo, you lost it, but you found it. Boom, in the 3rd line, Rosicrucian. Yeah, you get the cross, that is a solution. Vertical vibration, horizontal humanity, but love sprouting out can end the confusion. And if you really want to start it over, then smell the rose and then rover dover, stay in the moment every step you take. Otherwise the car could hit you with the first mistake that crosses paths. Everybody does the math. The grid takes you if you're gonna cut in half. You lost that bath, you're gonna take it up and half. You gotta wash that if you want the factory path. You gotta make a new thing like the path train using your brain. If you wanna get outside of the membrane, drained, but the drain revises. Capital takes it all and then supersizes. Boom, ha! Ariman, Satan, the center, reducing into material venting. But if the love that we take can actually expand the bodies that we make, create a new path, make it all right, and walking on the grid up and down tonight, with love in your step, every voice can go clear. Get that stuff in the rear view mirror. It is closer than it appears though, shit. And if you wanna quit, you gotta go legit with the love dub lovey-dovey boombox in the beat of the heart. An electromagnetic frequency, we can all start getting all of the lines from all of the times, and everything that glows in your mind, you can let it glow, let it grow, son, let it beat up. And the vision, if you want to expand, you can bring it all like vision to fusion. Never confusion, never to losing. And if you're gonna make it every single day, awaken, take it out and token. Not just a token for the words that I've spoken, just love it.
Wow.
Thank you, everybody.
you.
Let's walk.